Hello and welcome to the Bartholomew School GCSE English Language Revision video for English Language Paper 1 Question 2. This is the language question. This video is for students in Year 11. We're going to be working through the example paper on the text called A Rose for Winter. So you need to make sure that you have in front of you a copy of the text and a copy of the question paper. If you don't have these yet, you can access them via the school's SharePoint pages, that is the learning platform. Just go to the English page, then select Year 10 and 11. When you're there, you should see a folder called Year 11 GCSE English Language. And when you click through, you should find the PDF document called Rose for Winter paper. So if you haven't got the paper, pause the video, find the document, print it out, and then we'll be ready to get started. Question 2 is the language question, which focuses only on a small amount of text, but it's important that we understand what's going on so that we can read it in context. So let's begin by reading the whole text before we get down to the question itself. So this has a narrator travelling in southern Spain in the early 1950s. It is his first night in the new country at the port of Algeciras, which is near the British island of Gibraltar. At this time, Spain was quite cut off from the rest of Europe as it was run by a fascist general. Night in the town. The shops still glow. One walks through thick crowds which the day's end has called forth into the streets, a multitude which flows down the hill towards the harbour, giving off as it goes a remorseless, pebbly chatter like the drag of a stream in flood. Here, during the late hours before the evening meal, the whole town passes before one. Here, in the dim patches of light, thrown forth from the doors of wine shops, one sees the great eyes of the girls, formal as Persian paintings, and brick-red mouths and bodies loose as dancers. And the young men, wickedly handsome, with thick greased hair and curling moustaches, each face a gypsy's warning, each jacket slung like a cape over the swaggering shoulder. These boys were made for quartered hose, for Toledo swords, and quick-flashing brawls of honour. But today their claws are clipped, and rhetoric their only weapon. At this time, too, pass all the other characters of the Spanish streets, the dark-veiled women hurrying home from the priest, the civil guard whom nobody greets, gold-skinned sailors and strutting carters, goat-faced ruffians down from the hills, and old men with the hollow eyes of hermits, their skin stretched thin on chill aesthetic bones. Then come the merry dirt-grained beggar children, aping the professional whine but giggling helplessly behind it, and the cripples crawling on hands and knees, the curious idiots waltzing and singing in long tattered cloaks, and the ghostly blind with their lottery tickets, stalking obliviously through the crowds, calling their numbers like mystic incantations, their white eyes fixed on the empty sky. So the first night in Spain wore itself out. For hours I watched and wondered, feeling the hot ground under my feet, hearing again the broken lazy dialect of Andalusia, and seeing in the faces around me the dark, unconquered countenances of the Moors. At twopence a glass I drank white wine, sharp and strong as the cheese of a goat. Then I walked back, down to the harbour, mazed and unsteady, and the lights of Gibraltar poured out of the sky like a heap of diamonds on the flat, dark sea. It was late now, and the harbour was deserted. Café chairs were piled up on the pavements, and a watchman slept on the stones. All was dim light and shadows, and a lapping of invisible water. Suddenly, from a dark doorway, a figure appeared and blocked my path, a young man with fierce slit eyes and a crumbling, pockmarked face. Stealthily, he rolled up the sleeves of his American flying jacket, and I saw that his naked arms were strapped to the elbows with watches. "You want good Swiss?" he said hurriedly. "You want Parquet 51? Come on, fella. Cost you nothing. It's very cheap. It's contrabando." I paused to take him in. Meanwhile, he kept edging away, looking quickly to the right and left, like a wild animal at a waterhole, too nervous to drink. Ah, contrabando, sweet fruit of Algeciras. I dodged behind him and slipped into my hotel. I was back, indeed, and there was a loud ticking in my ears. So you now need to turn to the question paper, and we'll begin by reading the question itself. So you need 3 highlighters to do this effectively. If you need to grab the necessary materials, do pause the video now. The question reads as follows: how does the writer use language here to create an effective description of the crowds arriving for a night out? You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. Before we read the passage that we're being asked about, let's just unpick the terms of the question. Notice that it asks you about how the writer uses language. That means we're looking for techniques and methods, not just general effects. We're also being given a specific focus, that is how an effective description of the crowds arriving for a night out is being created. We need to look for words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. This is where our 3 different colours of highlighter come in handy. We're now going to read the extract, and as I read it aloud, try to highlight in your 3 different colours a few interesting words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms that you think you could write about. You might need to pause the video after I've read it to help you do this. Night in the town. The shops still glow. One walks through thick crowds, which the day's end has called forth into the streets, a multitude which flows down the hill towards the harbour, giving off as it goes a remorseless pebbly chatter like the drag of a stream in flood. Here, during the late hours before the evening meal, the whole town passes before one. Here, in the dim patches of light thrown forth from the doors of wine shops, one sees the great eyes of the girls, formal as Persian paintings, and brick-red mouths and bodies loose as dancers, and the young men wickedly handsome with thick greased hair and curling moustaches, each face a gypsy's warning, each jacket slung like a cape over the swaggering shoulder. These boys were made for quartered hose, for Toledo swords, and quick flashing brawls of honour, but today their claws are clipped, and their rhetoric their only weapon. So what might you have picked out? In terms of words and phrases, I might zoom in on that word multitude, which describes the crowd as one large entity. The writer is focusing on the vast number of people, but is also interested in the way that they seem to behave as one. But the writer also focuses on 2 separate types of people. Firstly, he describes the girls. I've noticed that he describes their mouths and bodies as though he's interested in their appearance. There's something quite seductive about the physical way the writer describes them, but that contrasts the fact that they are described as girls, as though they are quite young. And then he writes about the boys. He uses language that creates an impression of bravado, of showing off in an old-fashioned way, with the adjective swaggering and the phrase wickedly handsome, as though they are swashbucklers or have come out of a fairy tale. He uses the noun brawls and the noun claws and the noun weapon, which could create an impression of danger or violence, but in this context they seem like harmless play acting. And I've noticed again that they're called boys and young men, as though they're just children. In terms of language features and techniques, there's lots, more than I can write about in the given time, but I'm especially interested in the metaphor of the crowd being like water, flowing down the hill towards the harbour, and the simile like the drag of a stream in flood. This adds to my impression of the crowd being like one entity, moving as one large unit. It also implies that their movement is inevitable, as though arriving for a night out, they are all heading to one place, they are all in agreement. I might also look at the different similes used to describe the girls. Bodies loose as dancers, as though again they're physically attractive and very relaxed, and the boys, who carry jackets slung like a cape, again implying that they are both relaxed and somehow playing at being heroic. And then lastly, for sentence forms, I might notice the repetition of here, that sentence opener that suggests the immediacy of the crowd, as though the writer is an important close witness. I'd also notice the 2 short sentences that open the passage, one minor sentence and one simple sentence, followed by the long sentence. The short sentences set the scene, and the complex sentence foregrounds the crowd, which is the main focus of this extract. So there's lots to say, and I might not have time to do everything, so let's just remind ourselves of the advice for this question before we look at an example paragraph and have a go at our own. So firstly, this question is worth 8 marks. You need to spend 12 minutes. Throughout your answer, you need to use short, well-chosen quotations. You also need to use technical terms. You should pick out the key lexical choices, that is the key words from your quotations, to be able to analyse them. And you should use the words implies, suggests, furthermore and because to analyse. Let's have a look at what a paragraph might look like. The writer effectively describes the crowd's arrival for a night out by using imagery to suggest that the crowd is one unit moving together. He uses a metaphor of water to do this, describing the way the crowd flows down the hill towards the harbour. This suggests that the crowd is a single entity, a large unit, and the use of the verb flows implies that this is a gentle movement, as though all the people in the crowd are in agreement and heading towards the same inevitable destination for their night out. This is developed by the simile at the end of the sentence that describes the sound that people make as being like the drag of a stream in flood. Again, this suggests a bubbling, continuous noise, implying that the crowd is sociable and contented. The writer also uses similes to describe the differences between the girls and the boys. The girls' bodies are loose as dancers, suggesting that they are relaxed, but also that the writer finds them attractive. Each boy carries a jacket slung like a cape, which also implies that they are casual and relaxed and are acting as though they are heroic. I've answered the question in my first sentence of my paragraph. I've used technical terms all the way through my answer. I've quoted and I've given linked quotations, so that to do with similar topics, they use similar techniques, and they're all quite short and are integrated into the paragraph. I've then analysed my quotations in detail, and you can tell that I'm doing this because I use words like suggest and implies all the way through. So now you can have a go at this yourself. Remember, it's worth 8 marks, you should spend 12 minutes, you need to use short, well-chosen quotations, and if you can link them together even better, you should use technical terms, you need to pick out key lexical choices, and you should use words like implies, suggests, furthermore and because to show that you're analysing. Good luck with your response and with the rest of your revision.